Oh, here we go. Are games getting woke? No. Well, it's interesting, right? Because you have to ask, what the fuck is woke? And I mean, it's more descriptive, right? Like, if you hear the word woke, like someone's woke, it's like you know everything about that individual. Like, you know their stances on Palestine, you know their stances on economy, you know their stances on Black Lives Matter, you know the fundamental ideology they're behind, and the fact that regardless of the situation, they need to defend the ideology. And I guess in the case of video games, right, you have odd things being added to games that people see and are like, what the fuck? Now, does that make the game itself woke? Maybe not, but the individuals use games as like this sock puppet, as like this VTuber to profligate their ideology, right? So I guess in terms the product is, but I mean games are just games. It's just they will add odd stories, and again, you know the individuals we're talking about cannot create because they have that ideological barrier keeping them from creating. Because like they don't believe entertainment belongs in a vacuum. They think, oh no, if you make this type like an entertainment about the colonization of Africa, they will think, oh, so you endorse this, you endorse colonialism, and it's idiotic because I mean I don't think games are like a Rorschach test. I think they just exist and people will play them, and if it's a bad game, if the game doesn't work, if it's like has egregious microtransactions, people will shit on it. And if they don't, you know, people won't. Lucy, what are you doing? But anyway, so yeah, games are woke, but because the individuals behind them purposefully make them this way.
Yeah, they're not. I know. I wanted this just as much as you guys. Oh, I'm so
God.
disappointed. Oh. I wrote a little cold open for this where I make a gaff, as I usually do. It's kind of my thing. Until I realized that somebody clicking on this video thinking that I agree with them because of no particular reason, only to be shut down in the first sentence, is a comedic catastrophe better than anything I have ever written. If that person is still watching, it does get better after high school. There is a lot of discourse around games as an industry right now, as a culture, with the critiques of battle passes, people lamenting the current state of unfinished games, unpolished products, the crunch time required to get them out, a whole variety of things that just
Yeah, and when you have the gamer identity, right? Like people would vote against this, the companies doing this would be held accountable, right? And that would just be that. But now we have this odd situation where like companies just hire shills, like they hire journalists, they hire people, they cultivate a specific type of audience that are contrarian because it's part of the ideology. And I guess before Gamergate, like gamers were a set of consumers, right? You know, it was a very niche. Gaming was a niche hobby that obviously was looked down upon, but people enjoyed the hobby regardless. I have the fucking hiccups. Hold on. And these people, they weren't looking to be accepted, right? They're just in their culture. They wanted to remain in their culture, play with a bunch of other fucking fat idiots in their mom's basement and be left the fuck alone. But you know, the woke individuals just couldn't do that because their ideology demands no, we will not leave you alone because you could possibly be thinking the wrong thing, and we must inject our ideology and throw it in your face. And people are against this. Like, you had a bunch of people that did not care for politics. They just don't care for these types of individuals, these Karens, these people that, you know, worry about what everyone else is thinking and doing. And, like, they were against the Christians and the televangelists that were saying, like, these are the same people that were against them, right? So it's not really an ideology thing. It's what the fuck are you doing and messing with the things I like type of thing.
Seep into the culture of it. To peek behind the curtains a little bit, that is actually what this video started as, and I'll probably make a video about it sometime in the future, until I was sucked into a dimension of moral cowardice, where the desire to be heard, to feel the warmth of the crowds agreeing with every syllable, pervaded everything in sight. I saw an Asmongold clip on TikTok. If you haven't gotten one, imagine a flashbang, but for opinions. As it turns out, getting famous for playing World of Warcraft to such excess that the house that you are living in has to be entombed in lead does not lead to a well-defined priority list. Unbeknownst...
Yeah, but Asmongold is a gamer. You know, he plays games. It is his culture. And people gravitate to him because, again, they have opinions. They just look for people to validate that opinion. And it turns out, yeah, quite a few people do agree. And again, he allows people to disagree as long as they're not being assholes and spurging. Right? I think his chat is probably the most polarizing on this topic than most anybody else. Because again, one, it's Twitch, and Twitch clearly has people of an ideological leaning, and they impose this clearly. Like, you see it, I see it, and part of the ideology is to be subversive, is to be like, what are you talking about? It's like, you know what I'm talking about. Like, assume what I'm saying is true. What do you think about it?
To me, there has actually been a civil war raging underneath the surface of society. One side vehemently fighting against what they believe to be a perversion of basic moral decency, the forceful adoption of a nation-destroying ideology that is all orchestrated by weak-willed and pansy-footed members of a secret society, while the other side doesn't care and doesn't know the first side exists. In practice...
Well, okay, you have the normies, right? But see, that's what politics is, and it shouldn't be political, but hey, it's where we live. It's, well, the 2% arguing over the 99%, but you have people that at first didn't care, but then wonder why there's a fucking TED Talk in Dragon Age Valgar talking about being non-binary and their dark fiction. And I get it. If I talk shit about it, I'm the bad guy. Like, I understand, you know, the ideological tactic being done. What I have to argue is, what the fuck does this have to do with Dark Dragon Age? But no one can give me that answer. People just shit on me for talking about, oh, so you don't like non-binary people in games. It's like, no, I don't like if it makes no fucking sense. And again, you're making a game for a predominantly male audience. Like, if it doesn't have a hot female, we're not going to care. Like, I know it sucks to say I have to be the bad guy to point out reality. But if you don't have a cool male character with no shirt on, or a hot fucking female with a fat ass and titties, wow, people, we don't care. Right, what does this have to do with the game? Like, are you trying to cater to me or not? And yeah, sure, exceptions exist. But we know what's happening. They're actively removing things like these. And people don't care for diversity if it makes sense. Or if you do race swaps, you will piss people off, and rightfully so.
This difference manifests as people that like to use video games as examples for arguments on Twitter, and people that like to play them for fun. I've rewritten this script multiple times. It is part of the reason it has taken so long to come out. I've even had so much trouble with it, I've considered binning the video, but who cares? I'm just gonna say something, and I don't care how it fits into the flow of the video. Dustborn is a game that did terribly and prominently features a diverse group of protagonists. In fact, that is the entire point of the game. And while it is definitely a factor, the diversity is only a problem because it is poorly written. In all fairness, creating characters that feel...
Nah, the problem is it was a bad game to begin with. They just put the diversity in there as like a shield. I can't even find it because it was up for so little. Like, you have the Vitiligo. This character looked different in the original. Like, in the original showing and showcase, she actually looked hot, but they changed her. Gay and dude with a guitar. Liberal man. But, again, this is just a bad game with a bad premise. If all these were white people, it would have still been a fucking bad game, but they actively added diversity just to check the boxes, just to get that ESG money.
Poorly written. In all fairness, creating characters that feel genuine and complete is difficult, even if you are drawing upon your own real-world experiences.
No. Just make a hot female with big tits and give her, a basic, one-dimensional personality. This is why people like anime, because you have one-dimensional characters. It's almost like D&D. You have characters with one-dimensional personalities, but putting in different situations and figuring out how they act. Now, anime has its problems where it tends to beat a point over your head, but people like anime is popular. I like anime. I think anime is just a superior product nowadays, and I think that's the benchmark, because anime is doing no different than what Western entertainment used to do before the wokies came in. The type of people that came in and tricked these companies of thinking, oh no, everyone likes social justice, everyone likes woke, don't listen to your consumers. The people that put food on your table, listen to journalists, listen to people on Twitter that will fucking try to get you canceled. Like, these are your audience. Mostly people who don't play the games but are the loudest and ideologically driven.
Compelling characters are borderline impossible to write. Most of us are not compelling. When you intentionally draw people's attention to specific aspects that are integral to our existence, whether it be race or gender or sexuality or ideological opinions, it is important that it is treated with respect and effort and represented truly, and many games just don't do it. For a variety...
Well, again, you put people in, interesting situations, right? You put these characters in situations, and that in and of itself tells the character, right? Like Mass Effect does this fairly well when you travel around your characters and they have different opinions, and based on your decisions and the character you play, you can either piss off a couple or I'll even sacrifice others, right? Like, it's less trying to flesh out the character, unless that's the point, right? Which, again, if that's the point, is to have, a telenovela where you have to autistically go into detail of the character and what they like and what they care about, like a dating sim, then, okay, then I guess I agree with you. But games in the past used to have some of the best characters that had the best, character depending on their situations, not really depending on them.
Variety of justified reasons. This is an interesting and complicated part of writing that I had to study in university because it is, in many ways, an aspect of world and character building that artists are currently trying to figure out how to tackle while also being old as time itself.
But I also think it's an over bloated thing that people only really care about if it's done incorrectly. Like Dustborn did it, and like a bunch of other games. Like, people don't really. How do I word this? I mean, gameplay is always key, but the problem is there's very few innovations in gameplay nowadays, right? Like, all first person shooters are the same, all third person shooters are effectively the same. Games like these with rudimentary combat that, well, is easy, so easy a fucking monkey can play it, you know. And obviously, they above that they throw ideology in it. Like, if this fat bitch doesn't shut the fuck up about her vitiligo, it's like, shut the hell up, bitch, fat bit heifer. But again, we've done this in the past, and it was successful in the past when games were a fraction of the cost, took a fraction of the time, with a fraction of the people, right? A fraction of the goddamn storage space. Like, games nowadays are 100 goddamn gigs. When fucking Mario, fucking that game, only had like 100 kilobytes, right? Like, it is such an overblow, and they add things to games that add nothing to the game. It just bloats the game. Like in Assassin's Creed Shadows, they had a base building where you do a prayer mini game, and you do a lot of talking and very little combat, and you can customize your fucking dog. It's like, what the hell does well, these are things that they add that don't really do anything. It just bloats the game, which is why the game's $70, and it's why they need microtransactions and predatory business practices to offset the bloated time and the bloat in the game.
It is also not the topic of this video. When people complain about
Man, you made me do all that for something that wasn't the topic. Well, at least the argument's there.
being woke or diverse, they do not mean that the diversity is poorly included, that it does a bad job of representing real people and their real struggles and influences society's perception on people that have kind of gone through a lot. They just don't like it when someone is brown.
Got him.
In many of their eyes, there is no such thing as well-written queer characters. To them, every level of diversity is oppressive to them, indicative of an agenda that is trying to be pushed. A game about
Well, because this is what the wokies did to games. Like, they've actively pushed these things in games, and they tell you that this is what they're doing. Like, the consultants at Sweet Baby tell you, yes, we're trying to destroy the games industry. They're trying to push these things in, even if it makes no sense, even if it doesn't fit the game or the culture, or hell, even if they have to fuck up other cultures, like in the case of Assassin's Creed Shadows, right? Or in the case of, what was it, that new Prince of Persia game where you don't play the prince and it doesn't take place in Persia and it has rap music, despite supposed to be Orientalism. Like, and because they do this, yeah, and this is now how people think, right? You don't give people a reason to think this way, then they think this way, and you're like, oh, how do people think this way? Like, again, it's something that shouldn't exist, but it does now, and people are contending with it, and people are running away from Western entertainment because these things are here.
exterminating straight white men while you romance other dudes with graphic interludes. And a game about bravely defending the motherland while the wives stay at home would be the same degree of woke if there was like a rainbow at any point. This is the most obvious when people are attempting to diagnose a certain failed game in the industry. One side interprets it as a greater social movement, indicative of a great schism between the ideology of the wider public who all agree with them, and the woke mind virus developers who are both individually evil and controlled from above. Concord is a specific example that they like to point at, and the
I'm
reality.
gonna take my dog out. Hold on. Ooh. Oh, I hate doing this. Got to edit the fucking video. Shut up, Lucy. Shut up, bitch. And I'm
The
back.
greater problems that they perceive don't even register for the vast majority. The truth is that while the game had pronouns and colored lipstick, it was heavily mocked and destined to fail the moment this guy said 5v5. Why would you do that? You should have.
But again, it's also not that right. Again, there's a difference between what us, the consumers, told and know versus people in the industry. You know, the culture around that. Like, that game was clearly made to suck up ESG money and to get, you know, I guess fool Sony into buying the studio. That was clearly there just to give them government grants. Like, I think the game was meant to fail because you have failure after failure after failure, and they all have something in common, that they actively, purposefully push diversity in the game, and diversity wasn't the problem. It was a problem because it was being used by, I mean, I say the devs, maybe by the devs, but by people defending the game as a shield when it was just a bad game. And not only that, you know, the journalists tried to defend the games, and like, I know based on what I was told that the developers, it's this culture of toxic positivity where you're just not allowed to talk against things that add nothing to the fucking product. You know, you're not allowed to even bring up the consumer in most board meetings. Like, their constituents are the shareholders and getting government grants, at least at the time, right? And 5v5 is fine if it's a good game. Like, Marvel Rivals is blasting this game. Yes, I'm doing the thing where I use the game as an example. But this idea that no one likes hero shooters is cope. Because at the time, what was the game? That Valve released wasn't X-Defiant. Well, X-Defiant was even fine, but that was more of a operator type deal, right? Like, again, the idea that hero shooters are dying was just dumb.
Run them along a little bit more. These are some of the first words that anyone spoke about Concord. The trailer was generally being well perceived, and then the moment they started talking about the game, it immediately shifted. Concord was dogpiled immediately when the game was shown. Pronouns do actually show up towards the end of the reveal, except nobody even watched that far, but they mostly appear to show up so that you know what to call the yellow trash can in a fight. Like, they don't show any character that would be traditionally masculine with feminine pronouns. It's mostly so that you know that the trash can is, you would say, I'm gonna get him. I'm aiming him. Communicating with the boys, but I thought communication was a key in a relationship.
Yeah, but that's not how people communicate in games. Like, they use names, they use call-outs. I mean, if we're talking about pro-level players, like, they have their own call-out. But sure, well, why not? Whatever. I mean, the pronouns don't care, but again, we know the ideology of the people and the things they're trying to push into games. Like, they're trying to impose changes that they know add nothing to the game. Oops. And they just want to feel good that they're imposing on the developer and the consumer. Because, again, the consumer have spoken, right? Which is why people were dogpiling it. Because journalists aren't going to listen. You know, very few YouTubers, like, they'll listen, but the company's not going to listen because, again, everyone's always boiled down to the most extreme and idiotic of the rest of us, leaving the rest of the fucking criticism to just be thrown away. And because of this, yeah, you're going to have people that sometimes even act irrationally angry about these things because people put value in the things that they do, right? At first, nobody cared, but now, like, you're forced to care because above the product being bad, you're not allowed to point it out, right? Because you have people of that ideology that will go after you, and it's like, okay, so now I'm being told, yes, these people push these things specifically because they have an ideology, and you point that out, and then people are like, oh, what were you talking about? It's like, okay, I guess you're just not part of the discussion or the argument, man.
What are you, dating these guys? As much as people want to play revisionist history, the sentiment among the comments at the time was that people didn't want another live service team-based shooter. The gameplay didn't look any more interesting than Destiny 2, and the trailer was such a misrepresentation of what the game would be, it almost felt like a betrayal.
If they had hot female characters, no one would care. People would actively go towards the game if the characters If that fucking robot had a thick dump truck, right, and that woman with the purple or the blue lipstick didn't look like a ma'am, people would have just bought it and shut the hell up. But they didn't, because you know the ideology of the people behind these games, right?
But Marathon will be different. When the game did release, the 20 people that were still paying attention did have critiques for the character designs, which some feel are too... whatever that means. But the criticisms were almost entirely focused...
It means ugly female, unappealing female characters, unmasculinized men. It's like they're trying to homogenize male and female. I mean, you might not agree with that definition, but I mean, if you want to be, with the discussion, assume let's pretend it's true, right? I mean, do you not agree that if it had hyper-masculine men and sexy females, that it wouldn't have sold? Because I think it would have sold a hell of a lot more than it did if it had those things. But we know that the developers actively removed things like that and also just made them unappealing characters, right? Like, why do you think Overwatch was popular? A friend of mine didn't even know it was a fucking game, right? They thought... I'm not allowed to say that on YouTube, but anyway.
On the difficulty distinguishing characters in a large fight or from a distance. Believe it or not, when people play video games, they're generally concerned with the fun that they are having playing it. This is pretty obvious from
But again, games are a visual medium. Therefore, you cannot convince me that the visuals don't matter. Like, does it matter more than gameplay? No, I don't think so. I always think gameplay is king. But again, if you're not going to really build upon the gameplay, like, you kind of gotta stand out somewhere. And are visuals not that thing? Why do you think people bought Stellar Blade?
Design perspective, things that are important need to be able to describe their purpose quickly and from far away. Medics have commonly worn different colored garb or Red Cross armbands, and not just for the fashion, but also to indicate assistance on a battlefield. However, occasionally, they did also slay. And not in the shooting the enemy combatant kind of way. This is already becoming a problem in Marvel Rivals, which has a far more distinctive design. The only similarities between these two is that they are blonde, white, and a woman. This one turns invisible, and this one turns into a completely different character. But pressing the big button on one of them is good. The other one is bad. Being able to figure out which...
Yeah, but Storm's also in the game. Like, what's your argument? Like, people don't really care the distinction. Because if they play the game enough, like, they'll understand the character and just know what's happening. Like, again, people who play games, right? Like, I got back into fucking For Honor. And if you're fighting a character, you know what to expect. Oh, it's an Orochi, so they're just gonna light spam and jump around and dodge fucking light. Oh, you're playing a Berserker. Oh, they're gonna cancel every second fucking heavy into another light. Oh, you're playing a Highlander. They're gonna Dun Maglasia I mean, these are distinctions you pick up by just playing the fucking game. Like a visual like indication of that doesn't really matter.
Which one is which from a distance in less than a second is very important, and you chose wrong. So while I do not doubt that many very reasonable people didn't buy the game because of woman and the robot has a pronoun, I didn't buy it because it's Overwatch in an unestablished sci-fi setting.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, we can speculate. Like, again, if it would have had hot characters, I think like I'm gonna die on this fucking hill. If it had hot fucking female characters and hyper masculine male characters, it would have sold. And if it, I mean, the game functioned, right? But because the people working on it actively did everything in their power to take that stuff away, it was just unappealing. Like, it didn't appeal in any metric, right?
Again, how do you keep showing up?
Sidebar. While editing this, I felt it was worth pointing out explicitly so there's no confusion. Regardless of if the diversity ruins the game with poor writing or just makes the characters annoying, should not dissuade anyone from attempting it. Connecting with and allowing insight into people that exist in real life and aren't going anywhere is, in my opinion, one of the desired outcomes of a creative work.
Yeah, I think diversity is important, right? Because just having the same type of culture in a game being portrayed, it just gets boring. This is why people move to other forms of entertainment, South Korean anime, above the fact that Western entertainment is bad. But even in Invincible, I mean, it was fine. But if it's done, you know, the people trying to do it, one, they don't really learn other cultures. Like, they know their American view on other cultures, but they don't actually know other cultures. Like, everything they learn from the world came from a university, and because they have a degree, therefore they have the authority to speak on the behalf of other cultures. Like, this is the ideology, and these are the people in these companies that they hire to cover their ass because of the social issues at the time. Like, they don't have the maturity nor the creativity to do it correctly. This is why you have the Prince of Persia, where you don't play the prince, and it doesn't take place in Persia, and it has rap music for some reason, and fictional Orientalist setting instead of Oriental music, because it was made by not people who, one, made the original Prince of Persia, not from people from the Middle East, white liberal Americans that whose only view of other cultures came from a university. And this is the problem, because you can't create above having a textbook of rules slapped upon just making a game. Like, you just make boring, vapid games.
Striving to make people happy, whether it is by making a 10-hour visual novel or just adding a character in the background who's gay, is a worthy goal, no matter the outcome. Back to the video.
This brings me to the fun part of the video, which is Steam curator groups. If ever there was a more concentrated example as to how pathetic this mindset is, it would be here. Because it appears that these groups actually play some of the games they review, which in this sphere does constitute bragging. Occasionally, they even
Yeah, because if you try to have the discussion on Reddit, you'll be banned. Until Elon Musk bought Twitter, if you try to discuss it on Twitter, you get banned. Like, yeah, there's a reason why people are gravitating towards these, like, sweet baby detector, because this is the things that are happening, right? And even, again, assuming these are happening, assuming that everything I'm saying is true. Again, the question is, what do you think about it? Right? Like, it's real difficult to explain this because on the internet, discussions are skewed in an odd area where you can't. It's difficult to really have the adult discussion about, say, hot female characters, because you have people that will come out of nowhere and be like, "Oh, you just want a goon, you just want a goon, oh, oh!" And it's like, no, like, there's a standard, a relatively high standard that existed that is being pissed away for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with the game, but because of social things that, sure, I guess isn't defensible. But again, you're making a game for a predominantly male audience. Like, what the fuck do you want in a visual medium?
Finish them, but like not in the same way that you or I would, as they're just playing them to look for problems. It is a fun concept for a party game, though. Read out the reviews, make people guess which game it is. You'll never get it right. These reviews are crazy. Contains overtly pro-LGBTQ messaging. Uses body shape 1 and 2 in place of biological sex during avatar customization. Wrong. Planet Coaster 2 contains overtly pro-DEI messaging. Features improbable female combatants, particularly from an early 20th century setting. A military game, perhaps. Lego Indiana Jones. And the second one, just to be safe. Body type. A and B. In place of biological sex. No thank you. Call of the...
Yeah, because this is not what the consumer wants. They don't want body type A and B. Right, like, again, because people know instead of male and female, like, activists really pushed this idea that they did not want that in the games and in the companies. And people see this with their eyes. And now the consumer's like, no, like, put it back. Like, even the CEO of, what was that fucking game? I can't remember it. Like, I do the videos on the game, but I completely forget about it. Was it Lords of the Fallen? Like, the very CEO of the Lord of the Fallen did a poll saying, "Oh, do you want us to remove body type A and B or replace it with male and female?" And overwhelmingly, the consumer, the people that put food on his fucking table, said yes. And what happened? The very community managers that have an ideology banned the fucking CEO from the subreddit of his own fucking game. Like, these are the people we're dealing with. And it's difficult to really put this into words, right? Because, again, you'd think this would matter. No, there was a push to push it into these games that, okay, maybe the Lego one's kind of goofy, but games like this, that where it just makes no sense. But because they're being told and pressured to put these things in, yeah. No, okay, maybe this particular review is a bot. But we know these are things happening.
The Wild, the Angler. Whoa! Yeah, good thing they reviewed that. I wouldn't want anyone to get woke pilled from Call of the Wild or the Angler.
No, hold on. I thought using specific games as a plot point, like you said, that was Twitter brained. But you're kind of doing the same thing.
Sex, Mankind Divided. This minor NPC in the DLC is gay, if you look for it. And also the progression system is tied to like augmenting the body with machinery, which I guess is kind of like being trans if you know nothing about that. But that does raise a lot of questions about prosthetics, and also that implant that Elon Musk is very fond of. Informational, fellas.
Nobody would care if she was hot. See, I can end that discussion right there. Doesn't matter if she's hot here. It was hot. No one would care.
I regret to inform you, a second fishing game has hit the curator group. Web fishing is not recommended, not because of any specific political stance. It just lets you tag yourself, and also the straight tag is like $1 million, which is stupid. Like, these people tag themselves all the time, and like either way, they're just missing out.
I mean, that's
I don't love men. I just love the fit. Sometimes the recommendations make sense. Like, yeah, a game being critical of American warmongering is not going to be recommended. Also, that word is not a word that people think is bad. It is just a bad word. There's also games like Sprawl, whose 5-ish hours are completely thrown out the window because there appears to be some kind of pride flag in the end credits. I say some kind of because the vignette is so strong, I can't be sure. It could be...
I mean, again, you're just pointing out the most craziest amongst, people with very legitimate criticism. And we know it's legitimate because, the same wokies point out that this is what they're doing. It's part of the ideology. Like, I'm one of few people that actually reads the ideological text, so I can actively hate. I can hate correctly instead of just, Reddit tier, fucking just fedora tipping type shit. Like, I've read the Bible, not all the way through, just specific things that were interesting, like the story of Samson and Samuel, David, and Saul. I mean, I just find it interesting. And I'm not really even hating on Christianity. Like, reading the Bible actually made me think, yeah, I mean, the point isn't that humans choose to do bad, and that's not a good thing. But anyway, like, if you read the ideological text of the people with the ideology, you know what's happening in these situations. You can actively pinpoint them, but I mean, if you're just gonna point out the craziest, like the 2% of crazies amongst people with legitimate criticism, I mean, you're not going to go anywhere. Like, yeah, you're just like, oh, hey, this is weird. I'm just like, yes, this is weird. Like, what do you want from me?
Something else. It's also such a small detail in the scope of the game. I couldn't even find any specific mention of it. I barely found anyone that had uploaded the credits. Beyond that, I have a sneaking suspicion that this is all either an elaborate joke or justification to play risque games with niche appeal that just spiraled out of control. Some of these are mainstream enough that they could be reviewed without playing them. Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the most documented games of all time at this point, and it has women that are good at fighting in, like, the promotional material, so, like...
is that Karlach? Yeah, she looks ugly. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that's a ma'am. Like, I guess you can kind of stretch, but nah, this is a ma'am. And this is the problem I have with Baldur's Gate, is that the women look meh. Like, the one hot character in Baldur's Gate 2 and 3, they made an old lady for no fucking reason, but the guys look stunning. And I was like, okay.
Woke. However, some of the games that appear are specific, as in averaging less than a single player per month with these tags, this Steam ID, and I have to display the name like this, otherwise I think my account will be banned. There are quite a few of these groups on Steam, and while they are genuinely pathetic and kind of gross, at the very least, it is extremely entertaining to have such an insight into the opinions of people that don't seem to enjoy video games as a concept nor as an activity. The sad truth is...
Yeah, there's, again, maybe there's a couple of idiots, sure, but I mean, you're so far away from the actual discussion that, I mean, I guess I'll watch the rest of the video. You might get to actually a legitimately good point. You had a couple in the beginning, but
Their criteria is transparently non-existent and dependent on the reviewer's feelings at the time of writing, which leads to different curator groups not agreeing with each other. This group also reviewed Sprawl, pointing to the giant political flag and the forced feminism in codex entries, but just listed it as informational as they did with Cyberpunk, ignoring the gay, square brackets, derogatory, parentheses, I'm being sarcastic, relationships, and a prominent trans character. Only point.
but it was a good game. Well, at least it got better. So
Pointing out that the character customization isn't tied to gender, whereas old school RuneScape was not recommended for borderline the same thing, if not in a lesser capacity. RuneScape, that's where we're drawing the line?
now hold on. It does say they banned people for disagreeing with changes. Right? That's bad. I mean, you're banning customers for disagreeing with changes of the product. I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but if it is true, assuming it is, I mean, are you surprised people are now shitting on it?
Borderline the same thing, if not in a lesser capacity. RuneScape, that's where we're drawing the line? Whatever. This happens because anti-woke is a nothing statement. Woke is not a defined political, economical, social view. It's
Yeah, but that's not the point. It's grassroots. It's people on the ground knowing what the fuck you mean when you say it. It's not a intellectual term. It's what you use for the bus driver, for the bloke in the bar, to where they know what the fuck you're talking about.
just a fluid, abstract concept that differs from person to person and, importantly, is applied by someone on the outside as a pejorative. For some, woke video games are ones that intentionally raise political subject matter of any kind, even if it agrees with them. For others, it is just the unfounded idea that a developer has changed the core of the game to include things that cash in on the cultural zeitgeist of kissing other dudes, or persuade others to their agenda of kissing more dudes. For most vocal dissidents,
Like, you can argue Baldur's Gate 3 is woke, but it's still a good game. So, I don't care. Like, what's the argument? Again, you're not even in the realm of the discussion. You're barreling out into nothingness, a nothing bird. You're like, oh hey, look at these weirdos, look at these crazies. It's like, yeah, they exist.
it appears as if a game can be considered woke or not depending on whether the reviewer finds the women characters attractive and, like, nothing else. The term traditionally attractive gets brought up an astonishing amount for people worried about the moral integrity of games.
Yeah, I agree. Like, they should be untraditionally attractive. Like, big old titties, big old ass. There you go. Like, there's a game coming out that I'm gonna probably talk about, and it's called Swords and Slippers. Like, it should be unfathomably attractive. Like, not conventionally, right? Like, I don't want to see the girl next door. Like, hot as fuck. Like, Nikkei Goddess Victory level hot. But anyway.
If they were truly worried about this, they would be playing Call of Duty with a chastity belt while eating cornflakes. If you didn't get that, look up Cornflake Origins. You will find some very disputed and very strange stories. It does raise, like, a paradox in the reviews, though. A big sticking point for them is that women have to be attractive, and that they're usually wearing something revealing. Most of these cretins had issues with Jill Valentine not wearing this in the remake, but also find issue with women in combat scenarios to begin with, because they...
I mean, because you're doing a remake. Like, people want, like, this is a situation where people are like, yeah, stick to the fucking source material. Like, the idea that in a remake you change it is just as proof that you think you know better. And I mean, maybe this was a good game, right? But yeah, people are going to see the change and talk about it because we know the ideology of people that do this, right? And even if it's not the point, again, people are going to make the assertion.
You think women are pathetic. But which is it? Do you want, like, women to not be in the game, or do you want to be able to salivate over the main character? Because, like, if both of these are true, their perfect game is just like a dude with a smoking bod, like just massive biceps.
Nah, I think people just want hot female characters. Or if it's a remake, people don't want anything to change. They just want some graphical update, and that's it. Again, like, you're arguing against, like, a 5% group of people that are probably just shit posting, and hey, there might be a couple people that legitimately just don't want women in games. I mean, whatever. But you're mixing this in with people that have legitimate grievances about their hobbies that they put time, money, and effort aside to enjoy, but then in comes people who don't care for the hobby. Like, have you noticed that there's no new music, like barely any new movies coming out, right? Like, you have new anime, and at least video games is the one thing where there are some level of innovations, and people just want games to go back to being good, right? Instead of pushing this odd thing, like these odd things in games that were told to be pushed, but it's against the consumer.
Wearing a compression shirt, wrestling dudes for the US of A. Close enough. Welcome back, Resident Evil 4. The biggest takeaway from this is most of this discourse comes from people that truly don't play games for fun, but
Nah, most of the Discord from people who, work for a living and are wondering why games nowadays are worse than games that are made like 10 years ago, and why entertainment as a whole are made. Again, you brought up like groups that only had a couple thousand people, right? As opposed to the millions of people that are probably legitimately play games. And again, you're pinpointing the craziest and saying, oh no, this is how all the anti-woke, like, or I don't know if he specifically said that, but it's very implied that it's all like, you haven't brought up a single legitimate criticism. Okay, I guess when you talked about Dustborn being just a bad game and Concord again just being another Overwatch, okay, that was legitimate. But as far as, social issues, you haven't brought up a legitimate criticism, period.
to reinforce their current worldview and try and force it upon others, which is amazing because that's what they assume other people are doing to them. They're so fine discarding good or bad games based on a fluid criteria of supposed moral crimes. These people...
Yeah, this is the consumer telling the industry, the companies, we don't want body type A or B, we don't want these weird games that clearly push odd social views, we don't want Dragon Age Veilguard, we don't want games like Concord and Dustborn. Like, this is the consumer going against the companies and demanding a better product. Right, like,
write off exceptional games like Outer Wilds because the playable race is not gendered, even though they're fish, and like one of the greatest games of our lifetimes because of a character creator.
Yeah, again, even if the criticisms are unfounded, I mean, it's still criticism. Like, why do people have these criticisms, you may wonder? Do you think just these crazies just came out of nowhere? Right?
All of the while, the angler, come on guys, give fishing a chance! I suppose there's nothing else to really say.
Yeah,
other
fishing
than that
games are just gay.
none of this is worth any more attention than the amount required to immediately dismiss it and then laugh at it. You could actually use these people on Twitter as a guide to your next purchase. I myself have added games to my wish list specifically because I found them on these curator groups. Like, I even found out Kingdom Come Deliverance was getting a sequel because of these people. Like, you can, with some degree of accuracy, use their guides to find well-made and interesting games that are quite niche because they are amazing at finding these things. Apart from
Yeah, and again, you can also find the games that journalists defend and attack you about and be like, okay, maybe I won't buy that game because, hey, it could be a good game. Or, you know, the games that have consultants on them, you can also be like, yeah, I'm not buying this game because this is not what I want to, you know, I want to support games being created and stories being created, you know, by creative people, not created with, you know, by committee. I mean, if you want to base your purchase and your worldview off of just the people, the very small niche of people you don't like, go right ahead. Like, I'm not going to smack your ass about it. But I think the consumer is doing the same thing. I think there's a hell of a lot more people that are against this odd situation than you're putting on, even if you're not really giving them a fair shake. So, yeah.
that, you know, thanks for watching. I was in Japan recently, so I couldn't write or like do anything, and then this video took a while. I wasn't there for any particular reason. I was just like committing.
Someone at work is teaching me the damn hieroglyphs, like damn kanjis of Japan. I'm like, bruh, this is interesting, but bruh,
crimes and like harassing people on the street.
huge.
Not for any reason, just for fun.
Okay, Johnny Somali, calm down.
Ah, 俺は crazy ですね. Don't say that. Don't say that to people. Don't say that to someone. Crazy ですね. Okay. I'm gonna see you guys later. Don't repeat that.
Very weird video. Again, you get these odd videos that just really just tiptoe around the issue, really. It's like they're scared to death of getting to the issue and to the legitimate grievance of people. I mean, it's still a decent video. Woke this, woke that, just let me fish, gosh damn. I also convinced that he said gay sex instead of deus sex. Very good. Shout out to these guys for reviewing Super Lesbian Animal RPG. Like, oh, thanks. I couldn't tell if Super Lesbian Animals was woke or not. Thank you so much. Huge. If you don't get that joke, I had to explain the origins of cornflakes so many times. Thanks for spreading the word, dude. The way I out loud said, so Leon Kennedy 2 seconds before he popped on the screen, I'm dead. You cannot beat the woke detectors Disco Elysium review. Contains overly pro-LGBT, features middle LGBT characters, compares characters. Like, you should, like, if these are the type of games you want, you should be happy these things exist. Like, if you want gay and gay and gay, like, hell yeah. Like, you'd be like, yeah, even if they're in the don't recommend, like, you should want these things. Actually fucking cackled over the logo Indiana Jones game being too woke. The woke left. Where did they go? I mean, they're still here. Games are so woke now you can't play any of them while sleeping. Only Pokemon Sleep is non-woke. If I remember correctly, another game they deemed woke was Hard Space Shipbuilders. A game where you fly around the ship dock dismantling ships. Why? Because no, it's pro-union. I mean, hey, that's the criticism. Again, you're taking the criticism of a small select group, or well, most people just gravitate to those groups. Not that because they agree with everything. I mean, they just want to see the weirdest of the weird. Women love me, fish fear me. I love women and fish. Hey, fucking men love eating fish. You got their review on RDR2 where they describe Sadie Adler, a literal suffragette, as acting like a modern day feminist. I mean, again, there's the way they acted in the past where they fought legitimate oppression and the way they act now, where you're living in probably one of the best times in human history. Yeah, I'd say, I mean, again, it's been a while since I played that game. The takeaway here is we need more big, buff men kissing one another in games, clearly. Hey, as long if they're hot, they have fat asses, all for it. No, I'm just kidding. Duke Nukem is too woke. He said people who don't play his game like men. Millions of new homosexuals were created by Duke Nukem's curse. I am one of them. Pray for me, brothers. Gay. Gay. But anyway, I mean, yet another video talking around the actual issue. But, I mean, okay video, I suppose. Peace.